The night Heather Locklear filed for divorce, Richie Sambora found out through the news. Not through a phone call, not through a conversation at home, through headlines. 11 years of marriage, a daughter they had raised together, a life built in Los Angeles through rock music and Hollywood television and late nights and long separations. And it ended in a sentence delivered by a stranger on the radio. That detail alone tells you something about how far apart two people can drift while still sharing a roof and a last name. And it sets up everything that followed. The silence, the scandal, the loyalty that outlasted the marriage itself, and the truth Richie Sambora kept locked away for nearly 2 decades before deciding the world deserved to hear it. February 2006 arrived without warning for Richie. Another week on the road, another stretch of tour schedules and recording commitments that had quietly become the architecture of his absence from home. When ABC News Radio reached him for comment, he told them it was completely untrue, because at that moment he genuinely believed it was. No fight had preceded it, no final confrontation, no ultimatum delivered at the kitchen table. Just weeks earlier they had celebrated their wedding anniversary, and Valentine's Day plans were already made. His home, by his own account, felt unchanged. And then Heather's representative released a single sentence confirming the divorce filing, and the floor dropped out from under him. Irreconcilable differences, the legal language read. To Richie, those 2 words carried 11 years of exhaustion, of miscommunication, of 2 people who stopped talking not because they stopped caring, but because silence had slowly become easier than conversation. Their beginning carried the kind of energy that makes people believe in fate. A mutual friend, makeup artist Lisa Christie, made the introduction, and 7 months later Richie proposed. The wedding happened quietly at a New Jersey courthouse, which might have been the end of the ceremony for anyone else. But days later they reaffirmed their vows in Paris, wrapped in the kind of romance that makes a moment feel permanent. Their daughter Ava Elizabeth arrived in 1997, and for a stretch of years that followed, the life they had built seemed solid in a way celebrity marriages rarely manage to be. Richie would say later that there was never a moment he didn't love her, and listening to the way he said it, you believe him completely. Rock music and Hollywood television don't coexist quietly, and the pressure of both worlds running simultaneously wore on the marriage in ways neither of them probably saw clearly until it was already done. Tour schedules pulled Richie across continents. The entertainment industry kept Heather under a spotlight that never quite switched off. Their calendars stopped aligning. Phone calls replaced conversations. Rumors grew louder than anything they were actually saying to each other. Love, Richie has said, was never the problem. Presence was. He loved her from a distance, from backstage rooms and hotel corridors. And at some point that distance became the relationship itself. The Los Angeles house still stood. The walls were the same. But the connection that had made Paris feel like a vow worth repeating had dissolved quietly somewhere in between, without ceremony and without announcement. What came next rewrote the public story of their marriage entirely. Weeks after the divorce filing, Richie's name appeared in headlines alongside Denise Richards, a woman who had been close to Heather. The tabloid framing was immediate and unforgiving. Betrayal, a love triangle, moral outrage aimed in every direction at once. Heather became the wounded party. Denise was cast as the villain. Richie stood in the middle, silent and overwhelmed, watching a version of events solidify in public perception that bore only a surface resemblance to what had actually happened. An anonymous insider claimed Denise had encouraged Heather to file before beginning a relationship with Richie weeks later, adding another layer of accusation to an already complicated story. Whether that account was accurate didn't matter much to the headlines. The story had already hardened, and the celebrity culture surrounding both of them had no appetite for complexity. Richie has since admitted, without deflection, that he made choices he shouldn't have. He reached for comfort inside emotional wreckage he didn't know how to process. And in doing so, he failed to see how far the damage would spread. That admission cost something, and he makes it plainly, without performance. What the tabloid coverage buried was the human reality underneath. A man who wasn't trying to destroy something, but who grabbed the wrong thing while something was already collapsing. The entertainment industry had a way of compressing everything into scandal-ready narratives, stripping out nuance until all that remained was the version generating the most outrage. Richie stopped fighting that version. He chose silence instead, and silence turned out to carry its own price. Without his voice in the conversation, gossip calcified into accepted truth. The public cast him as indifferent, cold, a man who had walked away from marriage without looking back. None of it was accurate, and all of it stuck. His silence, he has explained, was never about protecting himself. It was about protecting Heather. Speaking would sharpen the pain rather than ease it, and he made a deliberate choice to carry the weight of misrepresentation rather than wound someone he still loved. That decision cost him his reputation in certain corners of public opinion. It also revealed something about the kind of man he actually is, which is the part that rarely makes it into celebrity divorce coverage, because restraint doesn't sell the way scandal does. Fatherhood became the thing that kept him anchored when everything else shifted. Heather Sambora, born into a life already surrounded by cameras and public attention, became the one presence in his world that felt completely real and untouched by chaos. Richie hadn't grown up with a clear picture of what consistent parenting looked like, and years of touring hadn't exactly built those habits. But when Ava arrived, something in him reorganized. School routines started mattering. Bedtime conversations mattered. The ordinary moments that get lost in the noise of a music career suddenly carried more weight than any arena show. "I would die for her," he said at one point, and the directness of it landed differently than most things celebrities say about their children, because it didn't sound rehearsed. When Heather sought full physical custody during the divorce proceedings, Richie didn't turn the dispute into a public battle. He pushed quietly for joint legal custody, not as a strategic move, but because staying in Ava's life wasn't negotiable to him. After the divorce finalized, he bought a home just minutes from Heather's, not for appearances, but for school drop-offs, shared weekends, and the unglamorous rhythms of co-parenting that nobody photographs. He attended school events, stood beside Ava at public appearances, and showed up for the ordinary moments consistently enough that they stopped being remarkable to anyone but the two of them. Parenting after a marriage collapses in Los Angeles under those conditions required a deliberate effort that Richie made without asking for recognition. And that effort became the foundation on which he rebuilt the rest of himself. In 2013, he walked away from Bon Jovi at the height of their success, and the decision confused people watching from the outside. The Hulu documentary Thank You, Good Night eventually gave him space to explain it. He had been emotionally spent, trying to hold together family crises and fatherhood while the road kept pulling him in the opposite direction. Leaving meant surrendering the stadiums, the tours, the identity he had worn since the band first broke through rock music into something much larger. It also meant being present in a way that touring had never permitted. Halloween nights over stadium lights, dance recitals over sound checks. While fans and critics debated his departure, he was home, quietly rebuilding something that the music couldn't give him. Then 2018 arrived, and the headlines returned, darker than before. Reports of an arrest, a hospitalization, an overdose, an emergency call placed from Heather's own home. All of it surfaced at once, pulling back a curtain on a crisis that had nothing to do with entertainment industry gossip. His response was not an interview. He flew a fighter jet over her house with her initials marked on the aircraft, a wordless message of support that cut through everything words would have cluttered. Behind that gesture, he had already been working quietly to assemble doctors and specialists, acting not as an ex-husband with legal obligations, but as a father, and a man who still cared deeply about what happened to her. His own words on the subject were simple. He would always be there for Heather, and especially for Ava, and he was proud of his daughter's strength through all of it. Legally, he owed nothing. He showed up anyway. Fame, Richie has come to understand, doesn't protect anyone. It amplifies. It magnifies the distance between what people project and what they actually carry. And Heather Locklear carried more than the public ever understood. Richie had watched the shifts in private, the unpredictable mood changes, the moments when the brightness gave way to something darker. Addiction and mental health struggles were forces he wasn't equipped to navigate as a partner. He loved her, and didn't always know how to reach her, and the helplessness of that gap stayed with him long after the marriage ended. Her decline didn't arrive suddenly or dramatically. It moved slowly, hidden beneath the practiced composure of someone who had spent decades performing stability for a public that rewarded her for it. At 66, Richie Sambora carries the distance of time that makes honesty feel less dangerous. He didn't leave Heather, he has said plainly. She left him. For years he couldn't locate the reason, couldn't point to the argument or the moment that broke things. With time, the understanding softened into something less sharp. They hadn't stopped caring, he believes. They stopped showing up. Still married in name, already separate in practice. Two people who had loved each other genuinely and then drifted into parallel lives without ever making the conscious choice to do so. He doesn't position her as the villain of a story that cost him a great deal. He sees her now as someone who was drowning, and the divorce filing was her reaching for air. Through all of it, the tabloids, the custody arrangements, the Denise Richards scandal, the years of public misrepresentation, the 2018 crisis, the quiet daily work of co-parenting in Los Angeles, one thing never shifted. He still loves her. Not the way he loved her in Paris when they reaffirmed their vows, not the way a husband loves a wife, but in the way that survives everything, the kind that doesn't ask for anything back and doesn't curdle into bitterness when it doesn't receive it. She's the mother of his child, he told an interviewer. What can you say? 3 sentences that carried everything. The deepest form of love, Richie Sambora figured out the hard way, is often the one nobody ever hears.